Welcome to my Auto AI YT. News story, please like and share. Hello everyone, I am Aaliyah, born and raised in Maryland, a peaceful land with tree-lined streets and long rows of houses. There, I spent most of my childhood with my parents. My mother was a gentlewoman, always smiling at me from early morning, when she prepared breakfast, until nightfall. In the small kitchen, she loved my father, a man of few words, but responsible, and always worked hard to take care of the family. The whole, the family lived in a small, simple house, but full of love. Everything in my memory was perfect, or at least I thought so, but she loved my father. Then, when I was only 15, my world suddenly collapsed. My mother passed away after a short and sudden illness so quickly that I didn't even know what was happening. The feeling of emptiness grew as I saw my father become lonely in a house that was once filled with laughter. We continued to live, but we were no longer the family we had been. The morning I went to school, every night I came home. It was still the same kitchen, the same simple meals, but my mother was no longer there. Every meal had only two people, but the distance between me and my father seemed farther than the space of the house. Then, when I was 18, my father remarried. It came as a shock, even though I knew deep down that he deserved to be happy again with his new wife. My stepmother was a gentle and kind woman. She brought with her her son Lucian, who was a year younger than me. At first, it felt strange, as if my life had been turned upside down. Again, things were no longer the peace I had known. But then my world collapsed when I was only 15. My world suddenly collapsed. My mother passed away after a short and sudden illness so quickly that I didn't even know what was happening. The feeling of emptiness grew as I saw my father became lonely in a house that was once filled with laughter. We continued to live, but we were no longer the family we had been with every morning. I went to school every night. I came home. It was still the same kitchen, the same simple meals, but my mother was no longer there. Every meal had only two people, but the distance between me and my father seemed farther than the space of the house. At first, I always felt awkward, trying to fit in with this new younger brother, even though he had never done anything to make me feel uncomfortable. He was quiet, and perhaps, like me, was learning to adapt to the situation. In the evenings, the whole family would gather in the living room. Family meals. Dad and stepmother sat below, chatting about work or plans. Lucian and I looked at each other with a slight confusion that made me immediately lower my head. Family meals were the same, gradually becoming an occasion for us to get to know each other better. But in a strange way, Lucian often picked up food for me, a small gesture that made me feel a little unusual. He was always quiet and didn't talk much, but sometimes gave me longer glances than usual. I wondered if I was being too sensitive or if it was just a younger brother's feelings for his new older sister. But it was undeniable that as time passed, there was an underlying tension between us, that neither of us spoke about the feelings that should have been just sisterly, but since when had become more difficult to distinguish. Late at night, there were moments during the day when I suddenly felt my heart beat faster. When Lucian was near, and I hated that feeling, hated that I had begun to think of him as more than just a brother. One time late at night, I heard light footsteps in the hallway. Lucian sneaked into my room as usual. We would have a brief conversation before he returned to his room, but this time he sat longer than usual, his eyes looking at me deeply, as if he wanted to say something I didn't know how to react. I just felt the atmosphere between us becomes strangely stifling. The silence dragged on. I felt confused, and before I could think further, I nodded slightly, inviting him to stay a little longer. We sat there in the darkness and the dim light, two strangers who were close in a way that no one could explain, to be honest. I liked Lucian quite a bit. My brother, he was very handsome in a way that I couldn't help but notice. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about since Lucian was my brother and my name after all. But those thoughts were often fleeting, ignored by more logical reasons, like the closeness of living in the same house or the harmony of two young people living in a closed space. We slept in separate, but closed by rooms, both on the second floor, while my father and stepmother slept on the first floor. This sometimes creates awkward situations. Lucian and I were both in a crucial stage in our lives. I was a freshman in college, and he was a senior in high school, busy preparing for big exams. We were both trying to get used to the new rhythm of life, but the tension after school between us was undeniable. There were evenings after school when we sat on the sofa in the living room, the TV lights softly shining, but both of us were silent, not knowing what to say. The feelings between Lucian and I were ambiguous. Not exactly the feelings of normal siblings. I realized that I liked him for real, beyond the limits of family love. The feeling confused me, but I couldn't deny that every time I saw Lucian, my heart beat faster. Times we accidentally met on the stairs, our eyes met. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. It was a peaceful evening, like any other, but perhaps I knew it wouldn't end the same way. My parents had gone on a trip for about 5 days, leaving Lucian and me alone at home at first. We simply thought it would be a time to relax, away from the supervision of adults. That night we sat together in the living room, turning on a romantic movie. It was a movie that neither of us were too interested in, just looking for something to kill. Time I prepared some dried squid fruit and a few cans of beer, a little relaxation after a busy week. The movie started pretty easily. The movie were sitting around chatting like we always did, small talk and light laughter filling the quiet of the house. But then the movie came to an unexpected scene, a scene of a couple passionately embracing each other. I don't know why, but we both fell silent. There was no more laughter or carefree conversation in the space between Lucian and I. Suddenly became stuffy, no longer. The comfort of two sisters sharing a simple moment, I could feel Lucian's eyes on me. No longer the usual gaze. A hot feeling began to spread through my body, but I said nothing, just sat there holding the beer, Ken in my hand, as a way to keep calm. But before I could understand what was happening, Lucian had embraced me. His movements were strong, unexpected, and irresistible. His kisses were urgent, as if all the emotions that had been suppressed for so long exploded. I couldn't resist. My heart was in turmoil, but my body reacted in a different way than we had crossed the limits of sisterly affection right at that moment in the darkness. And the quiet room that night was no longer a normal night. It marked a major turning point, a change that I knew would never be the same. Again that night, all boundaries were broken. I couldn't deny, the next day, that I had let my emotions take over and let what shouldn't have happened happen that whole night. Lucian and I were together completely, crossing all boundaries. We didn't say much. Everything seemed to happen instinctively, according to what had been suppressed for so long, that the closeness that we had tried to maintain was gone, replaced by emotions that we couldn't control. I remember very clearly the feeling of the next morning as the gentle sunlight filtered through the curtains. I lay there next to Lucian in the room that was supposed to be my own peaceful place to sleep. Everything around me was the same as every other day. The room was quiet, the light was warm, but inside me something had completely changed. We didn't say much, just silently looked at each other for a moment, and perhaps we both understood that from this moment on, our lives would no longer be the same. The following days, my father and stepmother were still traveling far away, and we continued to make the most of that time. There was no longer any feeling of awkwardness, but instead a contradictory comfort. We lived as if we were two people in love, free from the prying eyes of others. Meals were no longer family meals, but private moments, just me and Lucian every night. We sat together, watched movies, talked, and finally ended the night in the same bed. During those days, I let myself forget reality, forgot that Lucian and I were only sisters in the name we lived during that time, as if we were a young free couple without any worries. Everything happened so naturally, so easily, that I couldn't escape the feeling of being swept away by our secret love and long nights together. Then the day came when my parents returned. When they entered the house, everything returned to normal. Lucian and I resumed our roles. Two sisters under one roof. We acted as if the day came. Nothing had happened, as if the intimate moment had been a fleeting dream. My parents didn't notice. They kept smiling and chatting about their travels, while Lucian and I just sat there, silently sharing glances, knowing that our secret would have to be kept forever. In the months that followed, we continued to see each other together, continuing our secret relationship in secret. The sneaky times, the long sleepless nights began to happen, like a habit whenever my parents went to bed early or had to go out. Lucian would sneak into my room, and we would cling to each other as if there had never been a barrier between the US. During the day, we tried to act. Normal family meals continued as usual, and my parents didn't suspect anything. And Lucian and I only made eye contact this relationship, but instead of stopping, I chose to control it. I tried to convince myself that everything was still within reach, that we would never be discovered about a year later. Lucian graduated and went to college. He had to leave home and move to another city, to a year later continue his education. When Lucian left, I knew that our relationship would change, even though I didn't want to admit it. The distance between us made things harder. No more sneaky nights, no more quiet moments together. The distance forced us to put that relationship on hold, even though I still felt heavy with nostalgia. After graduating, I decided to find a new path for myself. I applied for a job as an office worker for a digital company. The job wasn't anything special, but it gave me stability away from the days of conflict and emotional turmoil. That's when I met him, the man who changed my life forever. He is the owner of a fairly large hair salon in the city, a calm, confident, and charming man. From the first meeting, I was impressed by his strength but gentleness. He was unlike anyone I had ever met before. Every story, every look he gave me made me feel safe, something I had never felt in all these years. We fell in love quickly. Everything happened naturally, as if we were destined to find each other not long after we got married, starting to build the family life I had always dreamed of. Now we have a child. together, and life is more complete than ever. The days with him and the child make me temporarily forget the painful memories of the past, although sometimes they still come back to haunt me in moments of weakness. I knew I had found a new home, a man worthy of love and respect. But somewhere in my mind, that the memory of Lucian in those secret days had not completely disappeared. I wondered if I would ever truly forget it all. But now I had a family to protect, and that was what mattered most. Yet, a deep part of me still felt guilty towards my husband. He was a wonderful man, always showing me genuine care and love. But every time I looked into his eyes, I felt a weight on my heart, as if I was hiding a part of my past that he should have known. I don't know if I should tell him about my past. With Lucian, sometimes the thought keeps me up at night, torn between telling him everything or keeping this secret forever. I'm afraid that if I confess, he'll never look at me the same way again. Everything we've built, the little, the family I cherish, could crumble because of a confession. But on the other hand, continuing to live with this secret is like a rock weighing down on me every day. It makes me feel like I don't deserve the love he has for me. Honestly, I don't know what to do. I'm at a crossroads, is not sure which path is right. Perhaps when you hear my story, you will criticize me for hurting many people, for making wrong decisions in the past. But I can only ask you, if you were in my situation, what would you do? Would you choose to confess the truth, knowing that it might break everything? Or would you choose to keep silent, letting the past sink deep into your memory, hoping that it will never come back to hurt the people you love? I hope to receive your advice in the comments section below. If you were in my situation, what would you? Should I confess everything and face the consequences, or keep this secret to myself to protect what I have? I appreciate any advice, sympathy, or criticism, because I'm at a crossroads, not knowing which path is right.